In the American South, communities and politicians have spent decades debating whether or not to remove Confederate monuments. Those in favor of keeping the monuments claim they represent Southern heritage and the nation's history more broadly. Those against argue the monuments glorify the institution of slavery and promote racism today. Still others find themselves somewhere in the middle, not wanting to celebrate this dark history, but concerned about the implications of erasing the past. In 2020, the debate boiled over as protests across the country following the murder of George Floyd led to actions against, and in some cases destruction of, many Confederate monuments. Regardless of whether we're talking about a statue of Robert E. Lee, a provocative billboard, or a massive stone carving, public art is contentious and polarizing. But why? What makes public art such a battleground? Hi, I'm Sarah Urist Green, and this is Crash Course Art History. Public art is, well, art in public. The word comes from the Latin publicus, meaning of the people. Public spaces are shared, accessible, and open to everyone. It can be three-dimensional, like monuments, installations, and sculptures. Or it can be two-dimensional, made on the side of a building, on stair risers, or in an alleyway. It can even be live, like a performance or an event. Public art can be permanent, like the statue of Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro. Or it can be temporary, like the grotesque puppet shows of New York City subway performer Kalen Sherrard. It can also be somewhere in between, like graffiti, which has no fixed dates but usually isn't around forever. We'll be talking more about that and other forms of unsanctioned public art in the next episode. But as ever-present as public art is today, the idea of the public hasn't been around forever. Only in the 18th century did people start thinking of themselves as a public, when more began to gather in social spaces like pubs and museums to enjoy art, music, and literature. Around the same time, they also began to share their thoughts and ideas through the growing print industry. This process led to our modern understanding of the general public as an audience for art, rather than only the elite. Because public art uses common space and resources, we relate to it differently than we do to art in a museum or a gallery. It seems to be saying something not only to us, but also about us, often in overtly political ways, which begins to explain why public artworks can be so very controversial. In fact, one of the most contentious pieces of political public art is also one of the most recognizable. I'm talking about Mount Rushmore, which has a way more complicated origin story than you might think. In 1923, in an effort to increase tourism in South Dakota, state historian Dwayne Robinson suggested a rock sculpture honoring the Old West, including the faces of Native American and settler figures to draw people's attention. But Gutzon Borglum, the sculptor of the project, had other ideas. He wanted a national monument that would draw people from across the globe, carved on the side of the massive Mount Rushmore in the Black Hills. His new design would become iconic: 4 U.S. presidents representing the founding, expansion, development, and preservation of the country, looking out in triumph. The 6-story tall faces would take 14 years, hundreds of workers, and $1 million to carve before it was completed in 1941. But there was one major perspective left out of this massive art project: the indigenous peoples whose land it was built on. To the Lakota, the mountain is known as Dunkashila Shakpe Paha, or Six Grandfathers Mountain. It's a sacred place, located on land which the U.S. government broke a treaty to steal. Around the time of the monument's construction, the Lakota tribe sued, and finally, in 1980, the Supreme Court agreed, offering them millions of dollars. They didn't accept the money, with the belief that the return of the Black Hills would be true compensation. 2 of the presidents honored on Mount Rushmore were enslavers, and the other 2 were part of the Western expansionism that killed Native people and drove them off their land. Even Borglum himself had ties to the Ku Klux Klan. So it's no surprise that indigenous people and people of color have had complicated relationships with the monument. In fact, several Indigenous-led protests have occurred there, including one on the occasion of a Trump rally in July 2020. And while Mount Rushmore is still a popular tourist attraction today, people disagree about how to move forward. Some advocate for its removal, and others its recontextualization alongside information about violence against Native peoples. Others support the creation of a counter-memorial. Just 15 miles away, there's an in-progress carving of the Lakota leader Crazy Horse, first started in the 1930s. So there's no consensus yet. There might never be, but the conversations are still happening. And the US isn't the only country facing debate over its political public art. As recently as 2018, the world's tallest statue was erected in the western Indian state of Gujarat. And holy guacamole, that thing is seriously huge. Named the Statue of Unity, it's dedicated to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, the first Deputy Prime Minister of India following its independence from Britain. But unity around a public artwork is hard to find. Some critics argue that Prime Minister Narendra Modi erected the statue as an essentially empty gesture, meant to gain political favor since his party largely stands in opposition to the party Patel belonged to. Others point out that it was built in part from imported materials and by non-Indian workers, despite the Prime Minister's promise that the project would bring jobs and support the local economy. And yet, there the statue stands, seemingly unbothered by the hullabaloo. And it doesn't look like he's going anywhere anytime soon. Still, these issues aren't always set in stone, even if they're made from it. Debate over public art often swirls around questions of not only what we want to remember, but also how we want to be remembered. And these ideas tend to shift over time as people and cultures do, affecting how we view the public art in our communities. So what, if anything, do we do with public art when it's negatively impacting our communities? There are many potential paths forward. Art critic Holland Cotter proposed that Confederate monuments could be removed from the public and put into a new context, such as a museum or a Civil War cemetery. There, people could learn about the history behind these statues, but they wouldn't project racist values in the public sphere. Cotter further suggested that new public artworks could be erected in their place to celebrate the achievements of historically marginalized people. New public artworks can show how a community's values have changed. Like in 2018, the National Memorial for Peace and Justice opened in Montgomery, Alabama, a city that was once a center of the U.S. slave trade. The nonprofit Equal Justice Initiative commissioned the Abstract Memorial, which was designed by a team of artists and architects from the Mass Design Group. The memorial consists of more than 800 individual steel slabs, suspended overhead as though hanging. Each one represents a county in the United States where a Black person was lynched. The names of the victims are carved into the slabs. It serves as a reminder of the scale of racial violence, honoring its victims. And to viewers today, it's a solemn reminder of work left to be done. While the National Memorial for Peace and Justice is a new monument, another approach is to create new meaning out of old art. Let's shift our focus to Poland. By the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, many Soviet monuments had been removed, but some did survive. This one, of a Berlin army soldier, still stands in Warsaw, and artist Kamila Czezno saw that as an opportunity. She dangled a swing from the soldier's hand and invited the public to have a go, which totally shifts the meaning of the work. When it was constructed in 1985, the Polish government would have seen it as honoring the Polish Soviet army that helped take down the Nazis during World War II. On the other hand, Polish citizens may have perceived it as government-sanctioned propaganda in a country disillusioned by communist rule. But now, the addition of the swing gives it an entirely new vibe. Czezno said the idea was based on a contrast between the monumental bronze statue and a tiny individual swung by a big hand of history. It encourages viewers and participants to think about how they personally relate to larger geopolitical forces, while having a little fun in the process. And yeah, sometimes public art is good fun. Like, everybody loves Chicago's famous artwork, The Bean, a massive chrome sculpture shaped like, well, a bean. A very shiny bean with a mirrored surface that reflects you, the city, and the sky all around you. It was created by artist Anish Kapoor, and it's officially titled Cloudgate. But the public started calling it the Bean, and it stuck. Which just goes to show that art in public spaces is made by an artist, but ends up belonging to all of us. In Kapoor's words, public objects have a weird way of morphing. He believes the millions of people who've taken selfies and wedding pictures with the sculpture own it just as much as he does. In fact, he calls it the Bean now too. Public art reflects not just what our societies are and were, but the hope of what they could be. And because humans are immensely diverse, it's impossible for public art to represent everyone. Instead, it represents fragments of ideas that change over time and collectively helps us piece together the human story. Next time, we'll learn about the kinds of public art that occur under less than legal circumstances, like graffiti and street art. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching this episode of Crash Course Art History, which was filmed at the Indianapolis Museum of Art at Newfields and was made with the help of all of these dedicated public servants. If you want to help keep Crash Course free for everyone forever, you can join our community on Patreon.